another video planned for today, but after reading Sunday's chapter, I pivoted and instead I realized maybe we should unpack some trauma. And apparently my way of doing that is going back and rereading as many traumatic backstories as I could. But anyway, we've all suffered over the last week, so I figured let's talk about it a little bit. A common thing that I see people mention when they talk about a barrier for them starting the series or a reason why they don't want to start One Piece is because it just seems really childish to them. And long-standing fans of the series know that yes, it is very childish, but it also explores extremely deep themes and real-world issues. So in this video, we're going to unpack some of the darker themes in One Piece, as well as talk about how the series is able to explore those darker themes in a way that can fit into a Shonen Jump issue without losing any of the impact. Starting with the darkness in this series. One Piece is a series that doesn't shy away from the darkness that humanity is capable of. It shows that things tend to look fine on the surface, but are a lot darker when you dig deeper down, like political corruption and manipulation to the point that the world government got away with genocide, hiding history and murdering a large group of people to control knowledge, abandoning people to die of a disease that wasn't even contagious, and in fact purging those very people, all the while showing a child that had to watch his parents be killed and his sister be burned alive, and then having to hide in a pile of corpses just to survive. But then there's the other side of it, where these oppressed people fight back, but the innocent children still suffer as well, and the cycle that can be birthed from these horrendous acts that people do to each other. There's experimentation on children and experimenting on the poor and the weak for the sake of entertainment, not to mention hunting down natives of a land for sport. There's torture, child abuse, addiction portrayed to the point of killing your own family, death and isolation, experimentation, terminal illness, people killing their babies to save them from starvation, racism, slavery and trafficking, rape, being robbed of your childhood because of being preyed on by adults, and I could go on. But I could pick any series and list all of the dark things that are mentioned throughout the duration of it. In this video, I want to focus on how this series handles these darker topics, which is to focus on the tragedy and then the impact of that tragedy on the individual. When darker chapters like this most recent one come out, I always see commentary, people saying, Oda can't go as dark as he would be able to if he had a different publication. He can't outright say or show fill in blank here because this is a shonen series. And then you'll have readers of other series that really revel in the darkness of the world, that'll go into the furthest corners of the darkest part of the world and kind of live in that grit. And readers of those series might say, you call this dark? But does a series need to show every detail in order to have full impact? I would argue no. I would argue that the full impact of a tragedy can be felt by the reader by simply leading them to the tragedy and then leaving them there to reconcile with what our character had to go through to get to this point, leaving the reader to reconcile with the implications of where you just led them. And I'm not arguing against blatantly showing trauma on page. One Piece does that too. I'm just saying that it's not required to revel in the grittiest moments in order to have the greatest impact of those moments. Because when showing trauma, the focus doesn't have to be on how gritty that trauma is. The focus could be on the emotions. It could be on what that does to the character and how they're going to recover from it. It could be on the impact as opposed to on the grit itself. Using another series for example, one of my favorite series of all time, Avatar: The Last Airbender. The series was leading up to two big confrontations, one between Aang and Fire Lord Ozai, and the other one between Zuko and his sister Azula. Now, focusing on the confrontation between Zuko and Azula, it could have been a really epic fight with really exciting hype music playing in the background, focusing on the action and on Zuko finally physically overcoming the family that has abused him and traumatized him his entire life. And it was, to an extent. But the other side of that coin was the focus on the emotional impact on this moment, the focus on what was lost. So instead of hype music playing, it was a slow orchestra. It was sad music. It was music while we were watching this epic, incredible, visually amazing fight, we were sad about what was being lost here. We were sad about the fact that Zuko got away from this family and Azula didn't. We're sad about the fact that Zuko having to confront his family isn't a hype moment. It's a tragedy that this ever had to come to this point. We still got the big fight that we wanted, and we still got resolution to everything that it was building to, but we got it with an emphasis on the impact as opposed to an emphasis on the grit. These series and many others prove that having a younger audience as your target demographic doesn't strip you of the ability to go deep into dark topics and not pull any punches and still have all the impact there. It just has to be explored in a way that focuses more on the emotional toll and the impact as opposed to the acts themselves. Now, different readers have different preferences, and I'm not trying to rank the methods of exploring trauma. I'm not trying to argue that one way is better or more effective than the other. Personally, I can tell you that I connect more with series that take you right up against the darkness of humanity and then ease off and let you explore it yourself. Let you have to process what you've been pushed up against without actually shoving you right in the depths of it. Personally, for me, I connect a lot more with trauma explored in that way. But I'm not arguing that that's a better exploration of trauma than one that actually gets you right in the thick of it. I'm just trying to argue that this method of storytelling is just as effective, that Oda isn't stifled or held back by being published in Shonen Jump, by trying to reach a younger audience as well as adults, as well as 30-year-olds sitting in a room in her basement shouting at a camera. That the series isn't worse off for being shonen, but that it holds the same value and has the same impact. It's just a different methodology. But I also want to talk about the other side of the coin, because the other comments that I see sometimes when we're talking about a darker topic explored in a chapter is, should this even be here, written in a series that's target demographic is kids? One Piece isn't a series that just leads you into the darkest places that humanity is capable of and then just leaves you there. It challenges the reader to desire justice in the face of cruelty. And with each new horror that we see, hope is always attached. Characters suffer in this series, but there's always a person showing them love. There's an abundance of suffering in this world, but there's always someone telling them not to give up and to keep fighting. And then we're given the hope that they do have a future. There are people in power that oppress the weak and cause great suffering, but there's also always someone around the corner that's willing to step in and fight for them. This is a series that couples darkness with hope of the next generation, a generation of people that will keep fighting, a generation of people that will fight for the oppressed and not just sit back passively and say, the world's dark, the powers that be are stronger than us, what can you do? It's a generation that fights, first for their friends, then for the needs that they see in those around them, then for the world. They fight. That's a message worth reading for kids and adults. It's a message that has impact on every reader. One Piece is a childish kid's story. It's also a stark look at the evilness that humanity is capable of, to the point that the mere memory haunts them, coupled with the hope of the kindness that we, the individuals, are capable of as well. It's a story that shows great suffering, but it always pairs it with great hope. I think we always joke about how Oda's really trying to traumatize us, and he's always trying to level up the next backstory. How traumatized can we make the next person? How much trauma can we throw at the character? We always kind of joke about how hard Oda goes with some of the storylines that he tells. But I think the wider picture of this trauma that shows up in this series over and over and over again is on the individual, is on exploring how this affects the individual and how they're supposed to move forward. But I think something that we need to make sure that we're noticing is what the series expects us to do with this trauma. Yes, it shows the depths of horror that humanity is capable of, that has happened historically and oftentimes is still happening today. But it leaves you to have to settle with that. It leaves you to have to deal with it. It leaves you to have to reckon with what we're forced to look at, and then it always provides hope. Hope that people are also capable of great good. Hope that people, that individuals can make a difference in other people's lives in small ways and in massive ways. Sometimes for being the family that they need, and sometimes for throwing the punch that deserves to be thrown. It doesn't look away from anything. It just chooses to shift the focus on the impact of how these things harm people, as well as on the desire for justice that it stirs up in the reader, and the hope that humanity is also capable of great good. I don't think One Piece is limited by being published in Shonen Jump at all. I think that it loses no impact in the way that it explores these things. And I love that my childish, stupid kid's story delves into such dark topics, but always pairs it with hope. But what do you think? How do you take the series? How do you like the way it handles these darker, more difficult topics? I'd love to continue chatting with you about this in the comments, so keep the discussion going there. I post videos every Monday and Friday on this channel, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays on the book channel, so if you enjoy talking about novels as well, that's always linked in the description. I'll see you again soon. Bye.